showing the world, forget all the accolades, forget everything else that we may talk about, that night in and night out, I'm willing to match up with whoever and show that I'm the best player on the floor every single night.
Unless, of course, his matchup is a 36-year-old Al Horford, or Bam Adebayo, or Clint Capella, or Marc Gasol, or for that matter, any team or player that he is matched up against in the second round of the playoffs. Because yet again, Joel Embiid has failed to make the conference finals, and the excuses are up. Until proven otherwise, Joel Embiid is simply not built for the moment. If you think this is an overreaction to one game, trust me, we'll talk about that game in a little bit. But I've got news for you. Over the course of Joel's career, he has played in 9 elimination games. And while you can see for yourself, it's been pretty much disastrous across the board. Just to put into perspective how bad this is, he's averaged a combined 32 points in the regular season the last 2 years. Yet his highest points tally in an elimination game is 31. And in that game, he finished with 8 turnovers, including plays like this. There's 50 seconds left in the game with the 76ers down 4. He's being guarded in isolation by Danilo Gallinari. Yes, Danilo Gallinari. And while he pump fakes, spins before getting stripped by Gallo, which leads to a fast break 2, and the game was pretty much over at that point. And that's still not doing him justice. Over the last 2 games against Atlanta, both of which were elimination games, Embiid recorded 16 turnovers, becoming one of 2 players in NBA history to have back-to-back playoff games with 8 turnovers. But who cares? Because Ben Simmons smoked a layup. Well, Ben Simmons clearly remembers, and there's no more excuses because there's no more Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid is still doing what he has always done. In Game 7 against the Boston Celtics, he finished 5 of 18 from the field with 4 turnovers, and the most dominant player since Shaq was getting clamped by a 36-year-old Al Horford. Here he is with the ball against Horford in the midst of a 15-3 Celtics run. He hits Horford with a flurry of moves, which are matched before going to a fadeaway and getting his shot packed. Now, it would be one thing if this was just an isolated play. I'm here to tell you it wasn't, because Al Horford blocked Embiid not once, not twice, but 3 times in Game 7. That was after he blocked him 3 times in the 4th quarter of Game 4.
Here he is with it. Right at the elbow against Horford, rips through, got to the rim, got it blocked! They load up, boxes and elbows. Horford blocked it again!
He had so much real estate in Joel's head that Embiid was refusing to shoot at the end of the game, which forced PJ Tucker to cuss him out. If PJ Tucker is cussing you out for not scoring, that's probably an issue. And this right here is an uncomfortable truth 76ers fans don't want to acknowledge. They constantly talk about how Embiid sees different coverages in the playoffs. And whilst that is true, for good reason by the way, because he is very turnover prone, but the so-called most unguardable player in the league was so unthreatening that Marcus Smart was guarding him in isolation for 5 minutes of Game 7. But just looking at things from a statistical standpoint, over the last 2 seasons, Joel Embiid has been a dominant isolation scorer in the regular season. In the playoffs, however, both years his isolation scoring has dropped off a cliff. And this is a very familiar theme with Joel when it comes to the playoffs. I showed you what he has done in elimination games, but if you look at the numbers he put up in this year's regular season and then compare it to this year's playoffs, it's night and day. In fact, just to go a step further, here is a list of the top regular season scorers from this year. And to the right of that list is the point increase or decrease during the postseason. Embiid had the largest drop of any player, and it wasn't really close, aside from Giannis. And the asterisk next to Giannis isn't because he was injured, so was Embiid. It's the 10 minutes he played in one of those games which completely skewed his stats. But forget about the stats for a second. The most damning part of Game 7 was the 3rd quarter. 20 seconds into the 3rd quarter, scores were tied at 55 apiece. Over the next 10 minutes, the 76ers scored 1 bucket, being outscored 28-3 in the process. No pun intended. And this is where your superstar has to step up. It's a team effort, but if you truly are unstoppable, if you are the best scorer in the league, you can't let your team go 10 minutes without getting a bucket whilst getting torched on the other end of the floor. That's exactly what happened. During the most important 10-minute stretch of the season, he went 0 of 4, missing 2 threes and getting blocked by Horford twice to go along with 2 turnovers. Here's an example. He's facing up against Horford. He drives right into congestion with no awareness of Marcus Smart sliding over before getting the ball stripped, and a turnover is forced. And this right here is where Joel Embiid consistently comes up short. For years, teams have been able to force turnovers by sending help, which leaves Philly fans with some idea that it's solely because Joel is some unstoppable force. But when you turn the ball over 5 times a game, whilst only recording 2 assists, of course teams are going to double you. And Boston were able to do it particularly well. Because of how Horford was defending him in isolation, there was no urgency to double team him immediately, so they were able to lull him into a false sense of security before picking his pocket numerous times. But you know the worst part about Joel Embiid consistently failing in the playoffs and consistently underperforming? He also fails to take any accountability. Everyone is talking about this quote, and I'll be honest, that's kind of out of context, but it's also hard to give him the benefit of the doubt because he has said things like this 3 years in a row.
Hey Joel, what was the moment for you personally tonight where your belief you had in terms of this being the Sixers' year turned to the recognition that it just wasn't going to happen?
Man, I'll be honest, I don't know how to say it, but I thought the turning point was just, we had an open shot and we made 1 free throw.
Not only is it wrong to throw a teammate under the bus like this, but when you consider the 16 turnovers he had in 2 games and the turnover I showed with Danilo Gallinari guarding him, it seems a little bit off to throw someone else under the bus. So the following year when Philly lost again, in embarrassing fashion, again to the Miami Heat, this is what he then said.
Since we got him, everybody expected the Houston James Harden, but that's not who he is anymore.
And whilst he wasn't exactly wrong, in the same game Joel finished 7 of 24 and 2 of 10 in the second half, scoring a whopping 6 second half points, and not only being outscored by Jimmy by a lot, but also scoring less points than PJ Tucker. But what I just said about Jimmy outscoring Embiid has been the most damning part of Joel's career. Every single time he's been matched up against a star-level player, guys who have never reached his heights in the regular season, aside from Kawhi Leonard, he has been outplayed consistently despite that. In fact, if you look at the minutes played of the teams and players he's actually beat in the playoffs, there's a strong argument to be made that Joel Embiid has not once won a playoff series against a top 20 player. Top 20! Yet despite this, who has received the blame for the 76ers' constant choke jobs? At first it was Ben Simmons, then it was James Harden, then it was Doc Rivers. Joel Embiid has been quietly disappearing in the biggest games for years now, and it's time people actually talk about it.